A young billionaire walked in on his maid dancing. She didn't see him, but in that moment, he saw everything, and nothing in that mansion would ever be the same. The mansion was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. The kind that swallowed laughter before it could reach the walls. The kind that felt like a warning. Malia stood by the kitchen sink, scrubbing a wine glass that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Her hands moved fast, but her mind was far away. Somewhere softer, somewhere kinder. She was only 24, but her eyes looked older. Tired. Like someone who had seen too much too soon. The mansion belonged to Elijah Grant, the youngest tech billionaire in the country. He was rich, powerful, and cold as steel. Nobody really knew him. He barely spoke, never smiled, and moved like a shadow through the house. He lived with his fiancée, Ava Daniels, a fashion model, glamorous and sharp-tongued. Ava treated Malia like dirt beneath her heels. She shouted, she mocked, and sometimes she didn't even see her at all, like Malia was invisible. Malia! Ava's voice rang through the hallway like a fire alarm. Malia flinched. She wiped her hands quickly and rushed to the living room. "Yes, ma'am," she said, eyes low. Ava sat on the white couch in a tight silk dress, flipping through her phone with long red nails. "You didn't shine my heels." Again. She pointed at the black stilettos on the floor. "I'll do it now," Malia said quietly. "You should have done it an hour ago." "Do I have to babysit you every day?" Ava snapped, tossing the phone beside her. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "You're always sorry. That doesn't make you less useless." Malia bent down, picking up the shoes with careful hands. Her heart ached, but her face stayed calm. She had learned to hide the pain. Tears didn't help. They never did. Behind her, the front door opened. Elijah had returned. He stepped inside, dressed in a crisp black suit. His eyes scanned the room briefly before he walked past without a word. No greeting, no nod, nothing. Ava's voice sweetened instantly. "Baby, you're back." Elijah gave a small nod, heading upstairs. Malia stood, holding the shoes like broken wings. Ava scoffed. "Next time, try not to disappoint me in front of him." That night, after the house went quiet, Malia lay on the tiny mattress in the servants' quarters. She pulled out a folded picture from under her pillow. A photo of her mother, smiling beside her in front of a small shop. Back when things made sense. Back when love didn't feel like something only rich people deserved. She whispered a prayer. "God, just let me make it through one more day." What she didn't know was, tomorrow everything would begin to change. The sun rose slowly over the city, washing the mansion in soft gold. But inside, nothing felt warm. Malia woke before the alarm. She always did. She slipped out of bed, bathed in cold water, tied her hair into a low bun, and put on her black uniform. It was stiff from yesterday's ironing, the collar tight against her neck, just the way Ava liked it. By 6:30 a.m., the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. Malia moved quickly, preparing breakfast, dusting the staircase, and setting the dining table with silverware that gleamed, like it had never been touched. She was halfway through polishing the chandelier when she caught her reflection. In the glass. She paused. For a moment, she didn't recognize the girl staring back. Dark circles under her eyes. Lips pressed in a line. Shoulders slumped. Was this really her? Once she used to smile without thinking. Once she had dreams of becoming a teacher, maybe even opening her own school. But now she lived between whispers and orders. Never seen. Never heard. Just tolerated. She leaned closer to the glass, breathing softly against it. "Who are you now? Still here?" Ava's voice rang from the top of the stairs. Malia turned quickly, hands behind her back. "Yes, ma'am." "Bring my smoothie. Not too cold this time unless you want me to pour it on your head." "Yes, ma'am." Malia hurried to the kitchen, her reflection left behind in the chandelier. Later that day, as she cleaned the guest bedroom, she opened a drawer and found a tiny bottle of perfume. Expensive. Rose and amber. She picked it up and smiled faintly. It reminded her of something. Her mother's scent, maybe. A feeling. She closed her eyes for just 1 second, then placed it gently back where she found it. Downstairs, Ava laughed loudly on a video call. "She's just the maid. Honestly, I don't know how Elijah puts up with her here." Malia heard it, of course. She always heard everything. But this time, she didn't cry. She stood up straighter, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked out without a sound, because somewhere deep in her chest, something small and stubborn whispered, "One day they'll see you." And soon that day would come, faster than anyone expected. The house was busy that morning. Ava was packing for a fashion event in Johannesburg. 3 days away, 2 nights, and a private suite waiting with her name on it. The staff tiptoed around her as she tossed heels, dresses, and makeup into 2 giant pink suitcases. "Elijah," she called, applying lipstick in front of the mirror. "I left a list of what I want done before I'm back. Tell Malia to stop folding my dresses like towels. I want silk treated like silk." Elijah stood by the bedroom window, phone in hand as usual. "Noted," he said flatly. "Ugh." Ava rolled her eyes. "Anyway, I've booked the flight. If the driver isn't on time, I'll fire him myself." By 10 a.m., the sound of rolling luggage filled the marble hallway. Ava appeared in full glamour, white sunglasses, red lips, and a purse that cost more than Malia's life savings. She walked past Malia without a word, then paused. "You better not mess anything up while I'm gone. And stay out of the master bedroom. That space isn't for people like you." "Yes, ma'am," Malia said calmly. Ava didn't look back. She simply clicked her heels down the steps and out the door. Moments later, the car sped off. And just like that, silence. Real silence. Malia stood by the staircase, mop in hand, listening to the stillness wrap itself around the house like a soft blanket. No shouting. No insults. No slammed doors. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. And then a small smile tugged at her lips. She tiptoed into the kitchen and turned on the radio. Afro beats flowed into the air. The music filled the walls with life. She danced a little as she swept. She even laughed. Her body moved without fear, without shame. Then she thought, "Why am I still wearing this uniform?" She rushed to her tiny room beside the laundry area. At the bottom of her suitcase was her favorite dress, a burgundy gown with soft sleeves and a gentle flow. She had saved for months to buy it. She changed quickly, added a little lip gloss, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. It was the first time in months she looked like Malia, not the maid. Not you, girl. Just Malia. She twirled once and whispered to herself, "Today I dance." The house was hers for the moment. She sang with the radio, danced barefoot on the marble, and even opened Elijah's fridge to steal a sip of the imported mango juice he always kept locked away. She wasn't scared. For once, she wasn't invisible. She was alive. What she didn't know was that Elijah's meeting downtown had just been cancelled, and the driver was already turning the car around. And very soon, the billionaire who had never truly seen her would walk in and never look at her the same again. The mansion was golden in the late afternoon light. Malia floated through it like a queen. The burgundy dress flowed around her legs. Her natural hair bounced freely as she twirled down the empty hallway, singing softly along to the music playing from the kitchen radio. She held a wooden spoon like a microphone, dancing like no one was watching, because no one was supposed to be. She stepped into the master bedroom to dust the shelves, her bare feet light on the polished floor. The sunlight poured through the windows, painting her skin in warm shades of amber. The dress hugged her gently, and her smile, soft, real, wide, lit up the room more than any chandelier could. She moved with joy. She moved like freedom. And she had no idea Elijah Grant had just walked in. The front door had creaked open minutes earlier. No one heard it over the music. Elijah stepped in quietly, surprised by the sound echoing through the house. He paused at the stairs, confused. Ava was supposed to be away. No visitors, no noise. Then he heard it. Laughter. He climbed the steps slowly, his footsteps light, like he was intruding on something private. When he reached his bedroom door, it was open just a crack, and through it he saw her, Malia, spinning barefoot in his room, singing into a spoon, the dress moving like wind around her. She didn't see him. She was lost in the moment, glowing, graceful. For a full minute, Elijah didn't breathe. He leaned against the door frame, mesmerized. He had known her for months, quiet, polite, invisible. But this was someone else. This was a woman. And then, he chuckled. It was quiet, but enough. Malia froze. She turned, her heart jumping into her throat. Her eyes met his. Her body stiffened. Mr. Elijah," she stammered, voice barely above a whisper. He raised one hand, not angry. "Just calm. Don't stop," he said softly. You are dancing so beautifully." Malia's face turned red. She backed away, bumping into a nightstand. I didn't know you were home. I didn't mean to be in here. I was just... I know," he said, stepping into the room now. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't distant. They were curious, warm. "I've just never seen you like this," he added. Malia stood frozen, the music still playing faintly behind her. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table for support. "I'll change and go back to work," she whispered. "You don't have to," Elijah said. "Not yet." His voice was different, gentle, real. For the first time since she entered the mansion months ago, he looked at her. Not past her, not through her. At her. And in that quiet moment, Malia realized something dangerous and wonderful. The way he looked at her had changed. And deep down, something inside her had changed too. The next morning came like it always did. But everything felt different. Malia stood in front of the mirror in her tiny room, staring at her reflection. The burgundy dress was folded neatly on her bed. She had changed back into her black maid uniform, but somehow it didn't fit the same. It felt tighter, like it belonged to someone else now. She tied her apron and took a deep breath. It was just a moment, she told herself. He probably forgot about it already. Still, her fingers trembled slightly as she poured Elijah's coffee. She carried the tray into the study with her head down, like always. He was seated at the long table, laptop open, glasses resting on his nose. Sunlight spilled across his shirt. She placed the tray gently in front of him. "Your coffee, sir?" she said. Elijah looked up, slowly. "Thank you, Malia." Her heart jumped. He said her name. Not you, not the maid. Her name. She looked up slightly, startled. "You're welcome, sir." He paused, eyes lingering on her face. Then softly, "You don't have to call me sir every time, you know." She blinked. "It's out of respect." He smiled faintly. Respect doesn't always have to sound so formal. Malia didn't know how to respond, so she nodded and stepped back toward the door. "Malia," he called again, just as she reached the doorway. "Yes, sir." "About yesterday," he began. Her breath caught. Elijah leaned back in his chair, his eyes searching her carefully. "I didn't mean to startle you. He looked down at his coffee. "You looked happy and free. I liked seeing that side of you." Malia stood still, her fingers curling around the edge of the doorway. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It won't happen again." "I didn't say that," he replied, meeting her eyes. "Maybe it should." There was a silence between them. Thin, electric, strange. Then the front door opened downstairs. A delivery man. The moment broke. Malia gave a small nod and slipped out of the room quickly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Elijah sat alone, fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. His thoughts didn't return to his emails. They stayed on her. On the girl, who danced barefoot in his room and smiled like the world hadn't crushed her spirit yet. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that image stayed with him all day. The afternoon drifted by slowly. Malia swept the corridor with steady hands, but her mind was busy. Every time she paused, she heard Elijah's voice from earlier. Maybe it should. What did he mean? Why would a man like him care if she was happy? For months, he had walked past her like she was invisible. Now he was remembering her name and watching her dance. She shook her head. "Don't overthink it, Malia. Just do your work." But it was too late. Something had shifted and she felt it in her chest. Downstairs, Elijah was in the living room. Alone for once. No Eva, no staff, no meetings. Just him in the silence. He was reading a report on his tablet but barely understood a word. His thoughts kept drifting. Not to stocks or deadlines, but to her. The way she moved. The way she lit up when she thought no one was looking. There was something about that moment yesterday that he couldn't shake. It was like watching a sunrise after months of gray skies. He stood up suddenly, walked to the kitchen and made 2 cups of coffee. Then, without thinking too hard, he walked to the hallway where Malia was polishing the wooden frames. She turned, surprised. "Sir?" He held out the cup. "You look like you could use a break." She stared at it for a second, confused. "For me?" He nodded, slowly, carefully. She took the cup from his hand. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away too fast. They sat in the quiet hallway, both sipping slowly. No talking, just breathing the same still air. Malia watched him from the corner of her eye. He looked human, not like the unreachable billionaire in magazines, but like a tired man who maybe needed this silence too. "You don't talk much," she said suddenly. He glanced at her. "Neither do you." She smiled, surprised he noticed. "I guess we both got used to being quiet." Elijah looked at her, then said, "I used to love talking, but people only heard what they wanted." She looked down at her coffee. "Same here." Another quiet moment passed between them, but this one felt peaceful, comfortable, familiar. Then Elijah stood, adjusting his watch. "Thanks for sharing the silence." Malia looked up. "Anytime." As he walked away, he glanced back and said, "And you can wear that dress again. You looked happy." She said nothing, but her heart thudded loud enough to fill the space he'd just left behind. She stood still for a long time. Then she whispered to herself, "What's happening to me?" Because she didn't just feel seen. She felt remembered. The peace didn't last long. 3 days after her dramatic exit, Ava came crashing back into the mansion like a thunderstorm in heels. The door flung open at 10:17 a.m. Her voice filled the house before her bags even touched the floor. "Where's my bag? Where's Malia? Who moved my Fendi bag?" Malia stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome back, ma'am." Ava spun, sunglasses still on. "Don't welcome back me. I left this place in one piece." She walked straight past Malia and into the living room, eyeing the sparkling floor with suspicion. The piece Malia had tasted vanished like steam. Within minutes, Ava was inspecting every corner, sniffing her designer throw pillows like a bloodhound. "What is this scent in the living room?" she snapped. "It's not mine. Did you spray something?" "I used lavender oil to clean the shelves, ma'am." "You've never—" "I didn't ask for creativity. I asked for cleanliness." Ava's voice cracked like a whip. "And why is my vanity drawer rearranged?" "I only dusted lightly. I didn't touch your things." "Oh, really?" Ava marched upstairs, heels stabbing the floor. Malia followed slowly, heart pounding. When she reached the top, Ava was standing frozen in front of her bedroom door. "What is this?" she hissed. Malia looked. It was the burgundy dress, hers, freshly, washed and folded neatly on the side table in the laundry, area Ava shared with the guest suite. Ava picked it up like it was poison. "You wore this," she accused. "Didn't you?" Malia's voice trembled. "It was my off day. You were gone. I didn't damage anything." Ava's face twisted. "You wore this. In this house? Around my fiancé?" Malia said nothing. Ava's lips curled into a smirk that was more dangerous than anger. "You think just because you wore your little dress like a peasant while I was gone, you've become something? Let me remind you who you are." Downstairs, the door opened. Elijah was home. He stepped in, suitcase in hand, surprised by the rising noise upstairs. As he ascended the stairs, Ava's voice became sharper. "Listen to me carefully, little girl. You're nothing in this house. Nothing but a mop with legs." Malia lowered her gaze, blinking fast. "And if I ever catch you trying to impress Elijah again, I will make sure you leave this house in tears." Just then, Elijah reached the hallway. "Ava," he said calmly. She turned, startled. Elijah's eyes moved from Ava to Malia, who was trembling, head bowed. "What's going on?" Ava faked a light laugh. "Oh, just correcting your little helper here. She's been getting too comfortable." Elijah didn't smile. He didn't nod. Instead, he looked at Malia. "Are you all right?" Malia hesitated, then whispered, "Yes, sir." But her voice cracked. He noticed. Then he looked back at Ava. His eyes were quiet but dangerous now. "A word," he said, and gestured for Ava to follow him into the study. As they walked away, Malia stood in the hallway alone, her arms wrapped around herself. The warmth of the past few days had vanished, and in its place, ice had returned. But what Malia didn't know was, Elijah's silence wasn't what it used to be. This time, it was building into something louder than she'd ever imagined. The mansion was tense, not the usual cold silence, but the kind that crackled with something unspoken, something waiting to erupt. Malia moved quietly, folding laundry in the service quarters. Her hands were steady, but her mind wasn't. Ava's words still rang in her ears. The way she held that burgundy dress like it was evidence of betrayal. The way she looked at her like dirt. But it wasn't that which hurt the most. It was the way Elijah had said nothing. No defense. No protest. Just silence. Again. She told herself she was used to it. But a part of her had hoped for something more. Downstairs, Elijah stood in the study with Ava. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders tense. Ava sat on the edge of his desk, still fuming. "She's just a maid, Elijah. Why are you so stiff about this?" Elijah didn't look at her. "You humiliated her." "Oh, please." Ava laughed dryly. She humiliated herself. Dancing in this house like she belongs here. Wearing that dress. "She does work here," Elijah said calmly. "She belongs here more than some of your bags." Ava's eyes narrowed. "So that's what this is? You're defending her now? I'm asking you to respect people. That's all." Ava stood, her voice rising. "Since when do you care about maids and their feelings?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Since I realize the people who treat them like they're nothing usually have nothing inside themselves." Ava's mouth fell open. "I'll be in my room," Elijah said, already turning away. "Don't bother joining me." Ava's face turned red. She stormed out of the study and into the hallway, straight toward Malia, who was just passing through with a basket of towels. "You think you've done something special, don't you?" Ava spat. "You think because you twirled in a dress and caught his eye, you've made it?" Malia said nothing. "I've seen your kind," Ava seethed. "Quiet little village girls thinking their smiles can climb ladders." "I'm just doing my job," Malia whispered. Ava stepped closer. "You're doing more than that, aren't you?" She raised her hand. Time slowed, but before it could land, a strong hand caught her wrist. "Elijah." His voice was calm, but it cut deeper than Ava's rage. "Don't you ever try that again?" Ava's eyes widened. "Elijah." "Not in my house." The silence was thick. Malia stood frozen, her mouth parted in shock. Elijah let go of Ava's wrist, but his stare didn't soften. "Leave her alone." Ava's lips trembled, not with fear, but with humiliation. "I can't believe you," she whispered. "I'm tired, Ava," Elijah said simply. "Tired of pretending you haven't become someone I don't even recognize." Ava stepped back like she'd been slapped instead. "You're choosing her over me," she said bitterly. "I'm choosing what's right." He turned to Malia, his voice gentle now. "You okay?" Malia nodded, too stunned to speak. "Go rest," he said softly. "You've done enough today." As Malia walked away, something in her heart cracked open. For the first time, someone had stood up for her. For the first time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, Ava stormed upstairs, and Elijah exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. Upstairs, Ava's footsteps were loud and angry. For a moment, the house went quiet again. But then Elijah heard loud banging, drawers opening, closet doors slamming. He went up to check and saw Ava in the bedroom, throwing clothes into her suitcase. "You're leaving?" he asked calmly. She didn't look at him. "I can't believe you humiliated me like that," she said. In front of a maid. Elijah stood by the door, watching. "This isn't about her. It's about how cruel you've become." Ava spun around, angry. "So now you're taking the maid's side? Over me? Your own fiancé?" "I'm not choosing sides," Elijah said. "I'm choosing what's right." Ava's face was red with rage. "You'll regret this," she snapped. She grabbed her suitcases and pushed past him without saying goodbye. A few seconds later, the front door slammed shut. The storm had passed, but it left Elijah standing alone in the quiet. That evening, the house was unnaturally still. No Ava, no orders barked from staircases, no heels tapping on marble like war drums. Just the quiet hum of electricity and the distant sound of rain beginning to fall outside. Malia sat on the small bench behind the laundry room, her burgundy dress in her lap. She wasn't wearing it. She just needed to hold it, to remember that moment before everything turned again. Elijah was in the dining room alone, fingers resting around a warm mug. He hadn't eaten since the incident. He barely touched his drink. His mind wasn't in the room. It was still playing back the look on Malia's face when Ava tried to slap her. The fear, The quiet heartbreak. The way she looked at him. Unsure if she was worth defending. He couldn't get it out of his head. He stood up, walked past the chandelier, past the hallway, until he reached the back patio, where he saw her, sitting alone, dress folded across her knees, hair wrapped in a scarf, eyes distant like she was somewhere far from this house. He stepped closer. "Do you mind?" he asked gently. Malia turned quickly, surprised. "Oh, no, sir. I mean, no. You can sit." He sat beside her, the bench creaking under his weight. Rain tapped gently on the edges of the roof. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elijah broke the silence. "How long have you worked here?" Malia blinked. 8 months. "And before that?" She paused. "I worked at a small restaurant. Washing plates, cleaning." He nodded. "Before that?" She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. "I was supposed to go to teacher's college. I passed the entrance exams. But then, my mother died. I had to start working." Elijah turned to her slowly. "And your father?" "Never knew him," she said quietly. "It was just me and Mama. After she passed, the landlord kicked me out. I went from house to house until I ended up here." Elijah said nothing, but the weight in his eyes grew heavier. "I didn't plan this life," Malia added almost defensively. "But it's mine now. I know what it's like," he said. She turned to him, surprised. "You. I lost my parents when I was 16. Moved from relative to relative. Built everything from scratch. People think money erases the past, but it doesn't." Malia looked at him, her expression softening. "You don't act like someone who's ever been hurt." He gave a small laugh. "That's the trick. You act like stone so people stop asking." She nodded slowly. "I guess I act like air so people forget I'm even there." He turned to her, really looked at her. "You're not invisible," he said gently. Their eyes met again, and in that moment the pasts they both carried didn't matter as much, because here they were, two quiet souls on the same bench finally being seen. The next morning felt different. Malia moved through the house with her usual grace, cleaning the surfaces, folding towels, dusting the corners no one ever noticed. But something had changed. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't hiding. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes brighter. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She didn't look like someone waiting to disappear anymore. And then it happened. Elijah walked past her with a plate of toast in his hand. "Malia," he said casually, "I saved you some." She froze. He turned back, held the plate out and added, "The toast. And I made tea. There's extra in the pot." Malia blinked. "You made tea?" He nodded. "I can boil water, you know." She laughed softly, covering her mouth. "Wow, the great Elijah Grant using a kettle. Don't tell anyone," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. She followed him into the kitchen, and for the first time, they ate breakfast, not like boss and maid, but like two people who were no longer afraid to take up space together. They talked about random things, favorite foods, music, the way Lagos traffic could make a sane person scream. He laughed when she mimicked the sound of impatient taxi drivers. She smiled when he told her he once got lost in a market for hours and had to bribe a boy with meat pie to show him the way out. Time passed gently, like water slipping through fingers. Later that afternoon, Malia changed into her burgundy dress again. Not to dance, not to impress, just because she wanted to feel like herself. She was wiping down the glass table when Elijah walked in, paused and stared. "You wore it again." "I did," she said without looking up. "You look like someone who belongs here." She raised her eyes slowly. "Maybe I do." He smiled, then cleared his throat. "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Just here, nothing fancy." Malia's heart skipped. "You mean, like a date?" He chuckled. "Like a meal. Between two people who don't need to pretend anymore." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." That night, she set the table with quiet care, lit a single candle, served rice and stew, not the kind served at rich events, but the kind that felt like home. Elijah arrived dressed down, no suit, just a soft navy shirt. They ate, they talked, they laughed, and as the candle burned low, Malia realized something that made her chest feel warm and terrifying all at once. She wasn't invisible anymore. And the man who once saw her as just a shadow was starting to see her as something much more. The night air was gentle. A soft breeze crept through the open balcony doors, lifting the curtain just slightly. The stars over the city blinked quietly above the mansion. Inside, Malia stood barefoot on the cool floor, clearing the plates from dinner. Her burgundy dress fluttered as she moved. Her heart hadn't slowed since he called it a meal between two people who don't need to pretend anymore. Elijah leaned against the doorframe of the living room, holding his glass of water, watching her without trying to hide it. "You clean up too fast," he said. She looked over her shoulder, smiling. "Old habits." He stepped further in. "You know, I've been thinking. Dangerous," she teased gently. He chuckled. "That day when I saw you dancing, I wanted to say something. I just didn't know what." Malia looked down, suddenly shy again. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful," she said. He shook his head. "You weren't. You were free. And beautiful. And for the first time, this house didn't feel like stone." The silence stretched between them, soft and full. Then, a familiar beat began to play. Malia had left the Bluetooth speaker on low volume in the background. A song came on, one she always played when she was alone. A soft highlife tune, the one she danced to that day in his room. Their eyes met. "I remember this song," Elijah said. She smiled faintly. "I used to dance to it alone, when I was happy, or trying to feel happy. And now?" She hesitated. "Now, I don't feel so alone." He stepped forward just enough to make her heart skip. "You never finished the dance." Malia blinked. "You want me to dance again?" "No," he said gently. "I want to dance with you." She stared at him, unsure. He held out a hand. "Just once." Slowly, cautiously, she placed her hand in his. He pulled her in, one hand resting on her waist, the other holding her fingers. They moved awkwardly at first. Elijah wasn't much of a dancer, and Malia was suddenly too aware of everything. His breath, his closeness, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. But then she laughed, and he laughed with her. Their bodies found rhythm, not in perfection, but in presence. She rested her head on his chest. He closed his eyes, and for a full minute the world outside ceased to exist. Just a maid in a borrowed dress. Just a billionaire who didn't know how to love until now, moving slowly through a house that had never known such softness. Then the music faded, and they stood there in silence, not touching, not speaking, but both knowing deep down something had shifted again. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in hope. The following days passed like a dream wrapped in silk. Nothing loud happened. No declarations, no flowers, no kisses in the rain. But something was growing. Quietly, softly. Elijah began joining Malia in the kitchen more often. Sometimes just to sip tea while she worked. Sometimes to help chop vegetables, even if he did it badly. "You're cutting the onions like you're afraid of them," Malia teased one afternoon. "I am," he replied. "They bite first." She laughed, and he watched her like that sound alone had become his favorite melody. He started eating whatever she cooked without question. She started teasing him like she wasn't scared anymore. And every night they would meet on the balcony. No plans, no pressure, just soft conversation under starlight. That's where they talked about things they never told anyone else. About Malia's dream of starting a daycare someday. About Elijah's memory of sitting in a dark hostel room after his parents' funeral, promising himself he'd become too rich to ever feel pain again. "You did become rich," Malia whispered one evening. Elijah looked out into the darkness. But the pain never left. Malia turned to him. "Maybe it wasn't supposed to." "Why?" he asked. "Because maybe the pain is what teaches us how to love gently." That night he didn't say anything, but when she turned to leave, he reached out and gently touched her fingers. He didn't hold her. He didn't pull her close. He just let her know. "I see you." And she smiled in return as if to say, "I see you too." The next morning something changed again. Elijah came down for breakfast and found Malia already in the kitchen, wearing the same black uniform she'd worn the first day he met her. He frowned slightly. "Going back to that?" She shrugged. "Some parts of me I still need to hold on to." He nodded. "That's fair. But I still remember who I am," she added. Even when I'm dressed like a shadow." He reached for her hand, held it gently. "You've never been a shadow. I just never looked properly." And she smiled at him. Not like a maid, not like a woman begging to be seen, but like someone who had found peace in her own skin. For the first time in his life, Elijah wasn't chasing power. He was learning how to sit still with someone and be real. Later that day, they sat in the garden sharing fried yam wrapped in brown paper, a simple lunch. But Malia turned to him and said softly, "This feels like everything I ever wanted." Elijah reached for her hand again. "Then let's not let it go." She looked at him, unsure. "You mean that?" He nodded. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want you in it." The sun slipped behind the clouds, casting a warm orange glow on their faces. She leaned into him slightly, heart full, eyes soft. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But she didn't pull away either. And sometimes, silence is the loudest answer of all. Saturday morning came dressed in gold. Birds chirped softly outside the windows, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh hibiscus through the open balcony doors. Malia stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room. No longer the servants' quarters. Her black uniform was gone. In its place was a soft cream dress, simple but elegant, with a tiny gold chain resting against her collarbone. It wasn't just the clothes that had changed. It was her eyes, the way she stood now, shoulders straight, chin lifted, heart calm. Downstairs, Elijah was pacing the living room, checking his watch, adjusting the collar of his navy blue shirt. He was nervous, not because he was about to sign a deal or speak at a conference, but because of what he was about to do. Malia descended the stairs slowly, each step measured, her hand brushing lightly over the railing. Elijah looked up, and for a moment time stopped. She wasn't the help anymore. She was the woman who had walked into his house, quietly, and turned the silence into laughter, the cold into comfort. The woman who danced barefoot in a room no one had ever entered his heart from. The woman who reminded him what love without performance looked like. "I feel overdressed," she said, breaking the silence. He smiled. "You look like royalty," she chuckled, cheeks blushing. "Royalty doesn't clean bathrooms." Elijah stepped forward. "Maybe this one does, but not anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet box. Malia's breath caught. "Elijah?" "It's not a ring," he said gently, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet. "Not yet, but it's a promise." She stared at it. "A promise that this house is no longer a prison, that you are not invisible, that you belong here, with me, however you choose." Malia blinked back tears. She held out her wrist. He placed the bracelet on slowly, his fingers lingering. She whispered, "I never thought someone like me." He stopped her gently. "You're not someone like anything, Malia. You're you, and that's exactly who I want." They stood there, inches apart. This time there was no music, no dancing, just two people choosing each other in a world that never expected them to. From behind the curtain, Ava watched. Her face was unreadable. She had just returned, hoping to reclaim her place. But the house was no longer hers. It had changed. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just whispered, so quiet only the curtain heard it. "He used to look at me like that." Then she turned and walked away, not like a queen, but like someone who had just lost a crown she didn't realize was already slipping. And in its quiet corners, a new queen had risen, not one dressed in jewels or silk, but in dignity, in grace, in love. The maid who once walked these halls with her eyes down was now walking, with her head held high, hand in hand with the man who finally learned how to look at her and truly see. And as the sun poured through the windows of that once lifeless mansion, Malia smiled, because this time, she wasn't just passing through, she was home. The end. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who change everything.